Hello, everybody. On this episode, we have the wonderful Kim Colgrove, who shares her amazing story of resilience after the death by suicide of her husband after his long law enforcement career. Stay with us.
You are a warrior.
321 status.
What kind of vehicle is it?
You are the very best your nation has to offer.
911.
Multiple shots fired.
They're asking you to lead.
5. We need a Bearcat.
It's up to us.
So 133. I need somebody that's got a visual on where the shooter is.
You must be sound in mind, body, and spirit.
42, where's the officer down? I have a rescue helicopter that wants to land and help.
This is the podcast that will make you the one.
Copy, running eastbound.
The one that will bring everyone back.
I believe we have shots fired. Give me backup now.
Because no one else is coming.
I'm going to have an officer shot. 100 block of East Street.
Suspect is down.
This is the Squad Room.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Squad Room Podcast, the place for cops who want to create more resilience, improve their work-life balance, and attack each day with positivity and a passion for the work that we do. On the show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use every day to create a life worth living both in and out of uniform. My name is Garrett Teslaw, and if this is your first time listening, thank you for being here. And if you've listened to a bunch of these, thank you for continuing to support the show. I'm a full-time sergeant for a sheriff's office in Southern California, and I'm on a mission to build a world where first responders wake up inspired, feel confident at work, and go home safe, knowing they've spent their time in a worthy cause. I feel like I'm talking very fast this morning, as if I'm extremely caffeinated, which I actually am, so I'll do my best to slow down. All right, before we get to our guest, I want to remind you of a few things. First, if you're on social media, make sure you're following us at The Squad Room and that you've liked our Facebook page. Also, make sure that you join our Facebook group. Just search the Squad Room group to join. But most importantly is to head over to thesquadroom.net and get signed up for our mailing list. People on the list get exclusive access to free resource downloads and stuff that I send out just to that list, exclusive to that list alone. I also send out, some challenges or some things to think about, things that kind of add to the conversations that we have on the podcast. So don't miss out on something that can help you in your life. Just jump over to thesquadroom.net to sign up. My guest for this episode, this is a good one. This is a tough one too. Kim Colgrove. Kim's husband, David, dedicated 30 years of his life to law enforcement. Then, less than 3 months after retiring, David took his own life. This devastating loss led Kim on a journey of discovery of how long-term and chronic exposure to trauma impacts us as first responders, and she felt compelled to do something to help. Ultimately, she transformed her pain by activating her grief. She told David's story, and she wrote a wonderful book, and she created an organization called Pause First, which is focused on first responder resilience and well-being. Kim's book is Mindfulness for Warriors, and I highly recommend it. As I mentioned, her organization is called Pause First Academy, and it's dedicated to helping us navigate through these issues, resilience and such, with a focus on holistic wellness and work-life balance. So obviously, Kim and I are very aligned in what our missions are, and we talked for, I think, like 35 minutes before I ever hit record to actually do the episode. We chatted about what she's doing with Pause First and what I'm doing here with the Squad Room, and, exciting things that are happening for both of us, and the fact that people are coming around to this. And Kim was already in this space in the corporate world, but realized that this was so needed in our professions, and she's right. So in this episode, you're going to learn what happened when the cops knocked on her door to tell her about her husband's suicide, and how she took that shock and pain and decided to do something about it eventually, and how mindfulness might be the one thing that could save your life. Plus, of course, a lot more amazing lessons and a lot more nuggets from Kim. I really enjoyed this conversation with her, so please welcome Kim Colgrove to the show. When we think about the equipment we carry with us on our person, we often assume that it's our sidearm that's the most important. But I disagree. Sure, it's important. But think about how important your radio is and how often you use it. Statistically, you're likely to go your entire career without ever firing your sidearm. However, you won't go more than a few minutes in patrol without using your radio. It's your lifeline to the outside world. It's how we call for help, set up a perimeter, request an ambulance, or maybe a supervisor. And think about it. If you do end up using your sidearm on duty, it's very likely that the next thing you'll use is your radio to tell dispatch shots fired. Our radios are incredibly important to our jobs and to help keep us and our partners safe. And it's important to make sure that you're using quality equipment. We can't control the quality of the radio we're issued by our department, but we can often control some of the accessories that we use to make them better and make us safer. I'm proud that Commgear Supply is a sponsor of this episode. Head over to commgearsupply.com and you will see their massive inventory of microphones, earpieces, speakers, batteries, headsets, push-to-talk sets, and everything else you need to help you stay in comms and stay safe. Their customer service team will help you make sure you get the right accessories compatible with your system. Now, here's the coolest part about Commgear Supply and why I'm so proud that they work with us. They have a line of duty protection warranty on many of their products. Yeah, that's right. If your gear ever breaks in the line of duty, they'll replace it. And prices are tax-free, and it's always free shipping on orders inside the U.S. and even to some parts of Canada. Go to commgearsupply.com right now and use that coupon code THESQUADROOM to get 10% off your order. Make sure you also follow them on Instagram at commgearsupply and let them know that you appreciate their support of the show. Kim Colgrove, welcome to the Squad Room. Thanks for being here.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Excited to talk to you. We got put in touch by a mutual friend, Wendy from the Guns and Yoga podcast. And she's like, you got to talk to my friend Kim. And she sent me some info on you. And I was like, I've seen this book, your book, always pop up on my Amazon recommended, readings, like people also bought or if I'm buying a book on something. And it's always intrigued me. And so I grabbed it and it's Mindfulness for Warriors, Empowering First Responders to Reduce Stress and Build Resilience. And I emailed you after I finished the book, and I'll share what I said to you in that email, but I'll share it here. It's like, this is a really important book. Like this book, I wish I'd read it 6 years ago, because I see so many lessons in it that could have lit that light bulb in my head to think, maybe I need to pay more attention to this stuff. Maybe I need to notice some of these patterns that these other officers in your book talk about and see them in myself. Maybe I need to be more aware as a good leader about how some of these actions and how some of these behaviors that you talk about in this book are happening in my people, the people that work with me on my squads. And then also, I wish I had these tools back then, and you walk through this. It's I can't recommend the book enough. Again, I'm just going to repeat the title: Mindfulness for Warriors, Empowering First Responders to Reduce Stress and Build Resilience. So first off, thank you for the book.
Well, thank you for talking about the book.
It really is fantastic. You have been a mindfulness and meditation instructor for a long time. And
yeah, about a decade now.
That's a long time. I'll qualify that. Yeah. And what I think, those two words, the M&M words, mindfulness and meditation, really are about what you say here in the subtitle, the resilience, building resilience. And I have had so many episodes recently on resilience or on mindfulness and meditation that, I worry that I'm scaring away a group of people that feel like it's become a buzzword. But really, I think it's finally getting the attention it's always needed, right? And you now exclusively teach and instruct with first responders and warriors, that warrior culture. And your story of your own resilience is just incredible and absolutely heartbreaking all at the same time. And so I was hoping you could share the story of how you went from teaching in a corporate setting to why you are now, passionate about teaching the first responder community.
Sure, I'd be happy to share that story. I was in January of 2011. I quit my full-time job to teach meditation and mindfulness full-time. And I taught small classes and worked with private clients. And then I started to get corporate jobs. So some of my corporate clients were Garmin International, United Way, Department of Veterans Affairs, National Court Reporters Association, a lot of other smaller and mid-sized companies in Kansas City, where I'm from. And that's what I was doing until the fall of 2014. And in September of 2014, my husband, David, retired from a 30-year law enforcement career. David was a police officer for 8 years and a federal agent for 22 years. And even though he left the house every day for 30 years with a badge and a gun, he had a master's degree in business development. And he spent the last 2 years of his career building a business on the side and appeared to be ready to retire and roll out the new business. And unfortunately, just less than 3 months after retiring, David drove to the back of our neighborhood and he took his own life. And that was shocking, to say the least, devastating, just unbelievable, because he seemed excited for the new business and his future. Of course, in hindsight, as I reviewed the year leading up to his retirement, there were all kinds of red flags that I probably noticed in terms of his increasing anxiety and things like that. But it took me a while. It was probably about 6 months after David died that I first allowed myself to think about that day and think about that incident, because I was cooking dinner like any other night. Cooking dinner, waiting for everybody to get home, and someone knocked on my door, and I tossed a dish towel over my shoulder and walked towards the door. And as I approached the door, I saw a uniformed police officer standing on my front porch. And I couldn't, every time I say it, like right now, I feel shaky. I have goosebumps. I couldn't believe, and I knew what I was walking towards because, my husband had knocked on people's doors. I knew. So for about 6 months, I was in survival mode, just doing all the things you need to do. And then for the first time ever, I allowed myself to think about that day. And I thought about that police officer that had to knock on my door and give me that information. I thought about the detective that had to sit in my living room and give me all of the pertinent information in that very businesslike manner, because that's his job, while I literally dissolved in front of him in my living room. And I thought about the dispatcher. I thought about everybody who would have been dispatched to that call that literally happened in the back of my neighborhood. They told me it was an off-duty firefighter that heard the gunshot and found my husband. And I could not stop thinking about these people. My mind just went from first responder to first responder to first responder, everybody that would have been involved. And I thought, this is occurring to me in a way that it never has, even though my husband did this work. It's so strange to say this, but I saw it in a different way. And all the pieces of this puzzle started to come together in my head. I thought, those 8 years in a patrol car, I believe, is what caused by far the most damage for my husband mentally and emotionally. And I thought about just how much of that he had encountered and endured in his career. And then I started to think about how this must really impact them mentally and emotionally. But my husband, like most first responders, didn't talk about it much and wouldn't get down into the weeds when he was, talking about it. I knew a lot of the stories and a lot of what he had encountered. And so that led me on a journey of discovery about the stress and trauma of first responder work. I started with law enforcement and quickly just realized that fire and EMS and dispatch, it's just all such similar trauma. And I just felt compelled to do something. My heart was so heavy over the work that these people do. What in the world would we do without our first responders? And yet we don't do anything to take care of them. And that's what turned the tides for me. And it was a little bit of a slow roll. David passed away in the fall of 2014. I continued to do corporate work for a while and started to try and figure out how I could reach out to first responders. And it was tricky in the beginning because I was knocking on doors and shaking hands and kissing babies, trying to get people to just say, hey, I want to teach cops how to meditate. And, that didn't go over very well in the beginning. But I finally met a police commander in 2017 who met with me and said, yeah, we're really starting to bring some resilience on, put together a training. We'll see if anybody signs up. So that's when I first offered my half-day training on meditation and mindfulness, and people started to sign up, and I started to fill that class. So I've been teaching that class since 2017, and I've taught it all across the states of Missouri and Kansas. That's where I live, and I've traveled across the country now. And it just keeps expanding. Now I have an entire academy based on resilience training. We focus on holistic wellness, really, and work-life balance. Everything that's been missing from these professions, the mental and emotional attention to your social life and your relationships, everything that's been missing from these professions we're offering now.
And it's great work you're doing. It's Pause First Academy, and we'll talk even more about that here in a little bit. But I'm curious about how, in the aftermath of your own trauma of David's suicide, how quickly were you able to bring in some of the meditation and mindfulness stuff, or was it something you set aside for a while, or is it what you ran to as a tent post?
Personally, me personally, using the skills personally, the tools. So
Yeah.
meditation and mindfulness are tools that I integrate into every day of my life. I practice some kind of meditation, mindfulness, quiet time every single morning. And it's been a part of my life for a very, very long time. I was originally trained in transcendental meditation when I was 10 years old in 1976, and I'm 55, so that's 45 years of meditating. So it's such an ingrained part of my life. And I think that probably helped get me out of bed and, up off the floor. Just having some built-in resilience tools that I had used my entire life. Because when something like that happens in your life, it's very, very difficult not to ruminate nonstop, wishing things had been different, wishing you could have saved them, wishing it wouldn't have happened. You really could just get stuck there.
Sure.
And conversely, everything in my life changed in that evening. David and I had plans for the future, and all of that just evaporated overnight. And so conversely, if you're not stuck ruminating about the past, I could really have gotten overwhelmed with anxiety about the future. And now what am I going to do? We had plans and all that's gone. So I think these tools helped me bring myself back to center, bring myself back into the moment, regulate those emotions. They had to have been helpful, although I didn't consciously say, oh, this grieving is so overwhelming, I can't breathe, let me go meditate. It wasn't that. It's that I meditate on a regular basis, and I think that has created a brain and body chemistry in me that is, I have the ability to maybe be a little more self-regulating than I would have been without these tools, if that makes sense.
Oh, it totally makes sense. And it's sort of it is the end goal of incorporating these things, right? So that it's just like we talk about with our shooting or firearms or our physical fitness or our arrest and control tactics. You don't rise to the level of your expectations, you fall to the level of your training, right? So if you've trained yourself to incorporate mindfulness and resilience techniques on a daily basis, you will fall to that rather than an absolute tragedy happens. Now I'm going to go learn these skills. It's much harder to learn it after the fact than it is to fall back to what you know. And if what you know is a repeated practice, I mean, that right there is the reason everybody should be starting this right now, right? Because if the trauma hasn't happened,
That's it. Absolutely. Because when the threat or the traumatic event occurs, if you have built some internal resilience, you're going to be much more likely to survive it healthfully. and not fall all the way down and stay down. Yeah.
I think also, a lot of officers are resilient, and I think we are naturally predisposed to being more resilient than most people because, we go through all this, the hiring process and the psychological exams and the backgrounds and all that. So we're stable people in general already, right? And so there's a lot of resilience that comes with that and with doing the job. However, a really resilient person at 25 may not be the same resilient person at 45, right? It
That's what I
begins
see over and over. Absolutely. Yeah.
begins to erode or chip away. That drip, that corrosive drip of the job can really chip away at your resilience. And so one of the challenges I have found in any mindfulness is being mindful of the fact that life circumstances change. You get older, you get kids, your financial situation might change. That all of those things will affect your resilience. So you cannot assume that at 25 you were good, so at 45 you must be great, And so the point of that is, for younger officers listening, or for anyone listening, start now. Even if you think you're already resilient, start with some of these techniques now, because it'll just support the foundation for you when it gets really hard, right?
For sure. It's like if they're physically fit now at 25, if they run or they lift weights and they're physically fit. If you stop running and you stop lifting weights when you're 45, you're going to be schleppy. I mean, it's, you have to maintain. It's
Yeah.
very similar. It's just, you know, workouts for your mental health and your emotional health instead of your physical health. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I believe we've got to start offering this training from recruitment all the way through retirement and beyond retirement, because we are losing an awful lot of retirees to suicide. And a lot of times they don't get counted because they've retired, right? So they're not in the head count. Yeah.
I've heard some statistics. They think the actual annual suicide count for cops is 2 to 3 times higher when you consider the retirees, because they don't get counted.
Yep.
And that should shock anybody, right? You said something at the beginning that was really intriguing to me. You were originally trained in TM at the age of 10. So
Yes.
there's a story there, because not many 10-year-olds get trained in transcendental meditation. How did that come about? What was your family life there that prompted that?
Yeah. Well, the short answer is my parents were hippies. And and in the 70s, that's what all the celebrities were doing. So the Beach Boys and the Beatles and all the celebrities were practicing transcendental meditation. My parents were meditators. And so they had me trained. So they spent some money and I went through the actual training. Transcendental meditation is a technique. It's still very viable. It's still around. It's what a lot of our research is based on. It's not what I practice anymore, and it's not what I teach. But that was that foundation that helped me create the methodologies that I ended up using down the road when I decided to teach meditation professionally.
That's fascinating. And what a gift, not just the paying for you to go to the course or whatnot, but like the gift your parents gave you of starting you on that early. And incorporating that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think about that a lot. And I think, I can remember a couple of times kind of being, gently sent to my room if I was having a little bit of a meltdown of some kind or whatever, and just like, hey, why don't you go to your room and just kind of sit down and spend a few minutes and meditate and just kind of calm down. So that's better than getting spanked or sat in a corner or a timeout, and and then I used that, and then for many, many years I used meditation in secret because everybody thought it was weird. So I was like a closet meditator, but I for sure used it when I was a teen and would get overwhelmed and emotional, and in college, when I would get very stressed. And I think I just kind of used it in secret. But it's been a tool that I've turned to my whole entire life. And yeah, for sure, I feel very fortunate that my parents had me trained at such an early age. I mean, imagine if all children were given coping mechanisms like that, and it was supported at home. Wow. Yeah.
We're trying similar things with our kids with varying degrees of success, but um, try just the simple fact of trying to help them acknowledge and understand what emotion they're feeling at the time, I found very helpful in helping them solve some of their problems. Um,
Yeah, that's
because
the
as
mindfulness component of the M&M, the meditation and
yeah,
mindfulness. A lot of people get very confused. What, are they the same?
let's
Are
go
they
into that.
different?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the mindfulness piece is just teaching your kids that how empowering it is to become aware of what it is they're feeling and allow themselves to feel it and be able to describe it. That's that mindfulness component that really is about awareness. So, the way that I teach the two skills, I teach meditation as a daily practice or an exercise that promotes mindfulness. And I think of mindfulness as a state of being or a way of being more present in each moment and more present in your life. And so to me, meditation is that regular commitment, that regular exercise, like going to the gym and lifting weights promotes physical fitness. Physical fitness is kind of that overarching, I'm in better physical condition, I have muscle mass and that. And the exercise is that daily practice that, helps that helps you reach that goal. And that's how I think of meditation and mindfulness, and that's how I teach them to people. And I think it's important to adopt a regular meditation practice. This isn't something that you use on the fly once in a while when you get super stressed out. Like, I'm not saying to any police officer, hey, when you get that really bad call, just sit down on the curb and meditate. I mean, it's not that at all. It's not that at all. Obviously, that's not possible. It's explore meditation, experiment with meditation, fit it into your life as a daily practice or exercise because of the benefits to the brain and the body chemistry. And that's how you're growing your resilience from the inside out. It's cultivating mindfulness and then developing the ability to get present, to be fully present in any given moment. That is like the secondary benefit of meditation, and that's mindfulness. And mindfulness can happen um, as second nature, which will begin to happen if you practice meditation and you become aware uh, that mindfulness is an important tool, that it helps you self-regulate, that it brings you into the moment. That happens naturally. But mindfulness throughout your day is also something you can choose in any given moment. It brings you into the present moment. It makes you more self-aware. It helps you take a pause. It helps you with decision making and, it kind of executive functioning. So it isn't just about sitting back and like being all chill. It can be very beneficial for you professionally. A lot of first responders will say, I don't want to be all relaxed and zen. I'm going to lose my edge. And so, what meditation and mindfulness can do for you professionally is really sharpen your edge.
Mm-hmm.
Put you more in the driver's seat. It's very empowering. When it does hit the fan, when you do encounter that threat or that traumatic event, that you have the ability to take that breath, get fully present. You're going to respond in a much more powerful way. You won't be as reactive. You're not going to make as many mistakes. Your decision making is going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
So many gifts of meditation and mindfulness. They're very empowering.
Yeah, I think it's a complete misnomer that people think that this is something that softens you up on the street. I see two immediate benefits to an officer that I can relate directly to my own experience. One is when it comes to mindfulness as a sergeant, being mindful of the people around me and how they are interacting or acting. So if I have a deputy who is acting out of sorts or appears, withdrawn or tired, I am better at recognizing that in them because I can recognize it in myself. That makes me a better sergeant because then I'm able to, try to pursue some help or some resolution or some guidance or some care for that officer now that I've recognized that, now that I see that, right? That's one. The other one is just what you said. If you become aware of how you're feeling on patrol, if you become aware of how your body's reacting to the stress, you are that much better of an officer, right? If you're rolling to a call and you notice your breath is short, you're breathing, from the chest up and your chest is tight and your heart's racing, that is valuable information to have before you get on scene to do what you can to calm yourself down or to calm that part of you down, right? You get that spidey sense on a car stop and you're able to listen to it, and you adjust your tactics maybe a little bit. Those are all things that are parts of mindfulness that we don't think of when we think of your parents, like that old outdated
Yeah,
idea of the this is for the hippies. It has really become incorporated in those things, and I have found those benefits in those exact situations I just explained dozens of times over. And I've had guys from Delta Force on this show who tell me it helps them when they go out on a raid in the middle of Iraq. Um, I've had more than a handful of Navy SEALs tell me like this is incorporated into everything they do. Like it is becoming, in the Eastern cultures, this was part of the warrior culture thousands of years ago. It's like this isn't new. We're just catching up. you know.
exactly. It went away for a while because mindful practices are a huge part of a lot of the ancient cultures and the ancient uh, warrior cultures. Yeah.
Mhm. So the book, as you go through, you talk about your story and you talk about David and your journey towards your passion and commitment to teaching first responders, and then you interview, I think it's 9 different officers from different backgrounds within the first responder community. And what I really enjoyed, they have a narrative of some of their traumatic events, but then you also share the things that worked for them, and the what they use to regulate. And there's a lot of consistent ones here, meditation, breathing techniques. A lot of people mention therapy and the importance of just trying, just go, right? And what I liked
Yes.
in the book too is you emphasize, or the people you interviewed rather emphasized, the first therapist you try may not be the one for you. So don't assume that is what the entire experience would be or will be. You might have to try 3, 4, 5 before you find someone that you connect with and you feel like is working with you. I think that's a very important point of all of the therapy aspect of this.
It's a huge
It's
important part, and it's very difficult to get people on board because everyone's so busy. And if
Mhm.
you've gotten to the point where you're even willing to consider therapy, then it seems daunting to shop around or to have to make the appointment and wait and go. And then there's not a connection. And then you have to find someone. I know it seems daunting, but the value is worth the
Mhm.
effort. That's the difficult thing. That's hard to convince people of that. But I was
Yeah.
really glad that a lot of the first responders talked about that, mentioned that. I think this is the key part of the book, or the most important part of the book, is the 9 first responders that I interviewed, because some are from law enforcement backgrounds, combat veterans. There's a dispatcher, fire service, EMS, all different backgrounds, but all very similar trauma. The trauma is so much the same.
Mhm.
And they share with us how they've struggled, which is in and of itself really cool that they were able to be so vulnerable in such a public way by, talking to me for the book.
Mhm.
And yeah, and then they share with us how they found a healing path, or what tools they used once they recognized they were struggling or suffering. And they tell us how they stay healthy. And I think that's invaluable to other combat veterans and and other first responders, because people see themselves in these first responders. If you read through the 9 interviews, and that's a lot of the feedback that I've gotten,
Mhm.
is I really resonated with this person or that person. It's so nice to know that other people feel the same way I feel. It's nice to know that other people have experienced what I've experienced and they're okay, because I'm very much not okay right now. So I think that's the powerful part of the book uh, is just that validation, or that, connecting with other people and understanding you're not alone, and other people have suffered very similar to you, and they found ways to heal and get better, and they're staying well. I think that's such an uplifting, motivational and inspirational part of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I connected with almost every story in this in some way. Something was, it recalled some call or a feeling or an empathy that for each one of these. And in your story too, and at the beginning of the episode, when you're telling the story about the officer at your door and the detective and the firefighter that, found him, and like, I've been each of those people at different times,
Yeah.
more than dozens, really. And you were talking and I was getting a chill in my spine because it connected with exactly what I've had, that same experience. And what I think is really unique about the book is you ask them all what needs to change. They each give their opinion of what the problem is and what needs to change in their communities. Give us the overall view of what they've said to you and what you've learned even since writing the book about what needs to change in our first responder communities to address this.
Well, the overarching theme across these professions is the silent suffering and the stigma attached to even admitting that the job has impacted you mentally or emotionally. So that suck it up buttercup culture, it's got to die. It's dying slowly, but there are still some older veteran people around that came up, in the pull up your bootstraps and suck it up buttercup, and they sometimes get a little in the way of
Or a lot.
bringing mental and emotional bringing mental and emotional healing to these people. So we just need to be patient and wait for them to retire out and get out of the way, because we're not turning back. We're making inroads, and it's not okay for people in these professions to suffer in the way they do. Their lifespans are shorter than civilians. Their divorce rate, alcoholism, addiction, health issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it is pretty common for first responders to retire and not be very healthy. Their mental health, emotional health, physical health, relationships are often not in good condition. And that's not okay. And the average civilian, the average person that is not connected to someone in one of these professions, they don't really understand this. They don't know, because they don't really understand what you guys see and hear and smell and endure on a daily basis. Since my husband died, I have educated a couple of people where in the past I wouldn't have spoken up, but my car needed some work one time, and I left it, and the dealership was giving me and another gentleman a ride home while our cars were being worked on. And the person from the dealership and the other gentleman were talking about the BS cops that's back up here and just waiting for people to speed and writing tickets because, where I live, it's suburbia and they don't have anything better to do. And in the old days, I just would have sat back there quietly because I'm not really very combative. But I said, hey, you guys, I don't mean to interrupt, but if you'd like, I could tell you what else that officer has probably done this month, if you'd like to know, other than writing tickets. And I talked to them about how much domestic violence they see and fatality accidents. And I just listed about 6 or 8 different horrendous things that happen every day in the suburbs, right here where we live, And they were both very, very quiet. And one of them turned around and said, "Ma'am," and I said to them, I lost my husband. He was in law enforcement, and so I know what I'm talking about. And he said, "Ma'am, my brother," he said, "my brother is a combat veteran, and I should know better than talking the way I was talking, and I'm sorry." And, and it ended up being a good conversation, and it kind of opened their eyes. And I said, "Guys, I get it. No one wants a ticket. But the next time you start getting, mad and kind of bad mouthing them because they're given tickets, just try and remember everything else they've probably seen and done in their career." And not to get off on a tangent about that, but my whole point was people who don't do this work do not really understand what you guys do. And so as a society, we have not done a good job of taking care of you, and your professions have not done a good job of taking care of you. Nobody's taking care of you. And you devote your entire life to taking care of us.
Hey everyone, I want to take a quick moment to remind you that this episode is sponsored by Colegrove Supply. Colegrove Supply is a leading provider of public safety radios and radio accessories. They have some of the absolute best prices around, and their line of duty warranty can't be beat. That's right. On many of their products, if your gear breaks while in the performance of your duties, they'll replace it for you for free. Do you have any idea how many radio headsets I've broken over the years and that I've spent my own money on? Probably close to one every year on patrol. Your radio is important, but accessories you can use mean the difference between a stealthy approach and announcing your presence a block away. We all know the old timer who never wears an earpiece and blows our cover creeping up on a suspect. Don't be that guy. Make sure the gear you're using is high quality and meant to keep you safe in a dangerous career. Learn more about Colegrove Supply and their line of duty warranty at comgearsupply.com. And don't forget, their orders are tax-free and it's also free shipping. They work with individual officers and large departments so they can meet any need out there. Seriously, their inventory is mind-boggling. Check out comgearsupply.com and make sure they know you appreciate their support of the show. Use that coupon code THESQUADROOM, all one word, to get 10% off your order. And we're at such a point in time or history where we have a confluence of events that is just a ticking time bomb, I think, for most cops, with all the defund comments going on and all the stuff surrounding social justice, and the lens, or the lens through which we are seen by not the majority, to be clear, not the majority of people, but a very loud minority that is hijacking the narrative about the entire profession, right? But they're doing a very good job of it. I see and I hear from officers all the time who there's this increasing feeling or sense of hopelessness that the organization doesn't have your back, that the job is dead, that the public doesn't support us, the public doesn't even like us. And what I've learned in doing some research for some other episodes, and you talk about it here in the book, is that idea of just hopelessness is very dangerous. It's not just a bad morale and bad idea, like coming to work is bad. Hopelessness is actually a leading predictor of suicide and PTSD. And how we train our mind to think about these things is so crucial to navigating these challenging times like this. And again, just the book, and you go through all the science of why people should practice mindfulness, why they should meditate, but it really comes down to what, the title of your company, but pausing and recognizing where we're getting hijacked, where we personally are letting or giving up control over our emotions, over our actions, our beliefs about ourselves. And that pause, learning that pause, not easy, but anything we do, just taking it back to policing, every call you go on, your biggest advantage is time, right? Like there is not a call you will go on where speeding things up is a good idea, right? Until you have to, right? Until you really, active shooter, time is on your side until you have to go in, and then it's speed, right? But pausing or increasing the time benefits it on the street, but it benefits us inside of our own heads too. And so that's part of what you teach, is this being able to pause. And I was hoping you could touch on that for a little bit, talk about pause 15 meditation, but also, breathing and how all that relates to this idea of just the initial steps of becoming aware of yourself.
Yeah. So developing the ability to pause and use a pause on purpose can transform your entire life. There are so many, many, many instances where the briefest pause to just take a breath not only changes your body chemistry, because when we're stressed and overwhelmed, the breath is the first thing that goes. The breath becomes shallow and choppy and labored. Sometimes we even hold our breath. Well, if you're encountering a threat or a critical incident, that is not going to serve you well. You have to keep breathing and keep your body oxygenated to keep your head clear so that you make good decisions. I mean, you guys even work on that in tactical training, right? In firearms training, taking that breath before you pull the trigger, taking that breath and then exhaling. So training yourself to pause can really transform your personal relationships, your professional life, because all day, every day, there's many, many incidents where if you will just pause and take a breath, or just briefly pause to get fully present, like to get fully checked into your body so that you're not mentally flooded. And when you're mentally and emotionally flooded and when you hold your breath, that's when you can't think straight. That's when the vision starts to go. That's when the thinking isn't clear. That's when you're going to make the mistakes. That's where your decision making is not going to be as strong as it would be. So it's like this. It's like the kind of this overall metaphor, just pausing, just slowing down, just taking a moment. And then it's actually a skill or a practice or a tool that you can begin to use on purpose. And use it at home. Use it before you reply to that email that made you mad. Use it before you walk down the hall to talk to that teenager who was late once again. Or, there's just millions of ways that we can use that pause on purpose as a powerful personal tool. And it doesn't make us weak and it doesn't make us slow. It makes us sharper and better decision makers. And it can make us better. And so that's kind of the overall suggestion, and the name of the company is Pause First. Pause first before you react. Like I said, even in firearms training, there's a bit of a pause. There's a breath, and there's a pause before you pull that trigger.
Yeah, the breath work and the pausing. You talk about kids, man. That there's no better place to institute a pause than when you're dealing with your own kids. So I'm curious. The squad room we've been around for a long time now, and the listeners, the subscribers, the people who listen, to every episode or listen really consistently, they're very progressive. They're I have found my audience to be very open to trying new ideas. And it's no shock, because you probably wouldn't be able to tolerate listening to me very long if you weren't out there looking for something new or looking for a solution to a problem that you have, right? Which is the whole reason the show started in the first place, was me trying to solve my own problems. And side note, not done yet, but that's why I'm here, and that's what I was doing. And so most listeners are very progressive. I do a lot of these episodes because as we grow and as we gain new listeners, this might be the very first time someone's heard of these things. It's their first time listening to some of these concepts. And then the people who've heard it before, this just reinforces and normalizes some of this for them. That's a long-winded intro to my question though, which is, you go out to agencies, you have the Pause First Academy, you talk directly to officers on a regular basis, or all first responders. I'm curious of the differences between fire, EMS, and us in terms of acceptance, or who's the hardest nut to crack when it comes to this stuff. But also, I've been to training. I've been to all the mandated trainings we go to, and you've got the salty old cops in the back with their arms crossed, and everyone sits nobody sits in the first 3 rows, right? And
Yes.
until the rookie has to come in and take that spot. So I guess I have a couple questions all around that, but I'm curious. Let's start with who's the most challenging for you to get across to? Is it the cops, the firemen, or
Oh my
EMS?
gosh, you are going to get me in trouble with this one, but I have to answer you honestly. So my assumption stepping into this work was that cops would be the worst, because that's what I knew. I thought they would be the most cynical, the less open. And I really had a harder time in the beginning with firefighters. They seemed even kind of more closed off. And when you come in, typically you're talking to groups of firefighters who they're like a family. It's a very
Sure.
different dynamic than police officers who are in a one-man patrol car. They're in the firehouse together and they eat together and all that. So they kind of form this family bond, and it's them and then it's outsiders, and so sometimes they're not very. But I've joked around about a lot of firefighters. I have a couple of firefighters in my book, and I have a lot of firefighters that are close friends. And I just joked around like, you guys are a hard nut to crack. And most of them will say, "Oh, I could have told you that." But and then as far as the crossed arms, I see it in every single class. And it was intimidating in the beginning, and then I quickly got over it because I'm here to help you guys. And I have some very simple evidence-based tools. You can take them or leave them, but there's a ton of evidence around it. And so if you want to feel a little bit better and be a little bit better, take what you want and leave the rest. But yes, lots of crossed arms. And what typically happens, though, is within the first 20 minutes or so, I open every training by telling my story. So I talk about my husband, the work he did, 8 years in a patrol car. He didn't encounter nearly what he did in his 22 years as a federal agent. Was different work. It wasn't that daily, patrol car experience. But when I talk about his suicide, and I talk about his trauma and how his death led me to research and think about and integrate into my journey of learning the trauma he carried from childhood through early adulthood, from the beginning of the job, that he had mountains of accumulated stress and trauma that he carried throughout his career that went unprocessed and unfelt. And there was no place for it to go as he was retiring. He had shoved it down, and there was no place else for it to go. So when I tell that story, arms start to uncross, and I'm a little more accepted because I was married to one of you guys, because I kind of understand it from the inside out. And now I'm starting to tell some of their stories that they are feeling or have felt the way David did. Mm-hmm. And now I'm starting to make them a little bit aware that you may have also carried some childhood trauma into the job. And that, is part of your accumulated pile inside of you. And one thing I have noticed, and this really stuck out, I was working with a sheriff's department out in Wisconsin, and it was a very big class. It was probably 100 people. And I had about a half a dozen older veteran people sitting in the front, believe it or not. They were about my age, early 50s, mid 50s, most of them in uniform. And then about halfway back in the classroom and over to the side, there was a group that looked like they looked like the age of my kids. I kept looking over there because this is how you know you're old, when everyone looks young. But they were probably mid to late 20s. Well, they were like talking and screwing around and laughing a lot during my 4-hour presentation. And that's distracting. And I'm a mom, so there's a part of me that want to be like, hey, but I observed. And the older guys sitting in front of me, a couple of them got teary off and on throughout the presentation and kind of fidgety in their chairs and uncomfortable because they were emotional. They started to cry. And it's the older 40 plus that come and talk to me on breaks, that ask me questions, that talk to me about their spouses and things like that. And so, my assumption coming into this work was that the older people would be craggy and salty and, wouldn't take it in. But I think what happens is they're starting to think about retirement, or they're getting closer to retirement age. And as I talk about David and my story, they see themselves, and they get a little anxious or a little fearful and emotional. And I've seen many, many, older, big, strong, tough first responders facing me in classes that, have cried during my presentation. And I think the younger people, that those 27-year-olds that were goofing around, I've seen that a lot. I think, they're new. They're just starting out. They've been on the job 5 years. They still feel invincible. Everybody feels invincible in the beginning, but we're planting seeds.
Right.
By offering these things, we're planting seeds. Yeah.
So true. I mean, you're invincible. This isn't going to happen to me. Even being aware of the potential traumas and the things you see, and you're like, well, I'm aware of it, so it's not going to happen. It's like, careful.
Yeah.
It's, I from my experience, I'm seeing that that 40 plus, 40 to 55, the guys that are still working for the most part, like are starting to be very open to these ideas. And they're not as dismissive as I would have expected them to be. Right. And then in the 20 something in the younger crowd, they've been exposed to these things for a long time. Meditation is not a weird idea to them. Some of these mindfulness techniques or stress reduction techniques, or even just going to therapy is not weird. Half of them grew up in homes where either their parents were in therapy, or they were in couples therapy, or the kid was in therapy for something that happened. So it's completely normalized in that group. But there's still an assumption that, but I'm fine.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I'm
it's
invincible.
a weird dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I remember that. It was a great feeling, feeling that way. But then there will come a day where you realize you're not,
Yeah.
Whether someone else reminds you of that or teaches you that lesson, and hopefully it's not someone else that has to do it. Hopefully we're able to learn that lesson for ourselves, that we're not invincible, because having someone else teach you that, on the street is going to be, that could end your life. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So tell everybody where they can learn more about you, learn about Pause First Academy, and how to sign up for your classes and the online coursework you're doing, and the book, and just tell us everything.
Okay, sure. I would love to. So you can learn more about the work I'm doing at pausefirst.com. So it's pausefirst.com. And with Pause First Academy, I have a team of trainers. They all have military backgrounds and backgrounds as first responders, everybody except for me. And they also all have experience teaching resilience of some sort in their own professions. So they've all been teachers or trainers in their own professions. And we offer in-person training, and we have the online option. And the best way to learn about all of that is at pausefirst.com. And you can get a hold of me by emailing me at kimcolgrove@pausefirst.com. If anybody has any questions, or I can help anybody with anything. Believe it or not, I have a lot of people that reach out to me after they read the book, or they read an article, or they hear about what's going on. And a lot of times it's spouses that reach out to me. Yeah.
That is not surprising at all.
Yeah.
That it's the spouses. And you just said something right there, and I want to challenge isn't the right word, but you said you're not a first responder, or you're the only one who's not. And that work that goes into being a Leo spouse, we in the uniform need to do everything we can to honor the work that goes into being a Leo spouse, because that is some very, very real work, right? And to put one cop on the street takes a team of people. And if there's a family involved, that leader there of the team is always the spouse. Same with my wife, and same with you. And you are leading in such a way that you are as much a part of this community as someone who puts on a gun and a badge or pulls up their turnouts or runs an ambulance rig, right? So I just want to take a moment to honor that and honor what you're doing in that sense for our community, our collective community, because you're very much on the front lines of changing this this belief that we have to do it alone. So thank you for that. And
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I will say that most everybody has been very open armed, welcoming to me, and really folds me in, because of the work my husband did, and also because if you spend 15 minutes with me, you can tell that I am just really driven to make sure that people get the help that they need and that everybody starts to face this. So I'm very much, I'm very much on your team. I'm very much pro you, first responder. And unfortunately, a lot of first responders will only hear it from someone who's on the inside or kind of one of them. So a lot of people don't want to go to a training by a clinician or a therapist or an academic type of person. Although I hope that will change too. But anyway, thank you for saying that. And I'm happy to be a kind of an honorary member of the greater, first responder club. And thank you so much for the work you do as well. And it really is time for us to shine a light on this and all of us get together and bring healing and wellness to the people who make our society go.
Can't say it any better myself, so we'll end there. Kim, thanks for your time. All of your information, how to reach you, we'll put that into the show notes so that people can grab that if they're driving or can't access it right now. They can go to the squadroom.net and grab your episode. Everything's there. It's in the episode show notes that they can read on their phone. They can access it that way. So again, thanks for your time. Look forward to continuing the conversation on this in other platforms, and lots of cool stuff to come.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thanks for listening to this episode of The Squad Room with Kim Colgrove. I always at the end of the show talk about how our guest relates to our badges, our 6 points of resilience, our beliefs, actions, discipline, goals, emotions, and service. And Kim is such a great example of this to me. Someone who took arguably the worst thing you could think could happen to somebody, with the exception of, this happening maybe to a child. That's probably the only thing I can think of that would be worse than this. But taking that and deciding that her skill set was something that could help prevent this from happening for someone else, and so she has taken it upon herself to do this. And I can attest from working in the same space, the discipline and the goal setting that it takes to do this is significant. And to create her own business and to launch a business around this that serves groups and serves a group that's reluctant to hear it, and how she is just bringing this to people. I think Kim is a great embodiment of the badges idea. So thank her for being on. All right. I want to offer something I'm very excited about, and it's absolutely free. We're launching Tactical Tuesdays, a free weekly email where we bring you a few tactics, tips, and strategies to help you succeed in the week ahead. It may be about a book I like or something I want to share, gear I found useful, an inspiring quote, or anything else I think you'd like. To sign up for the Tactical Tuesdays email list, you can visit thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays, or just text your email address to 805-364-2331. That's 805-364-2331. If you didn't catch that, check out the show notes for this episode. You'll find it there. And I promise, we won't sell or spam your email address. Now, I have one more thing for you before we wrap up. I have a challenge for you. I do this. I've done this for the last couple episodes, and I think it's good. If you got something out of this episode, if you're inspired by the conversation with Kim, I want to challenge you right now. Take a photo of your podcast player playing this episode, and I want you to share it with 3 friends. people you think need to hear what we talked about today. Send them this episode and recommend they listen to it. And also, if you got a little extra time, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. And if you can, leave a comment with your review. I actually do read them all, and I've gotten some good constructive feedback out of them, and I adapt and I adopt. And it also helps, really, really, really helps us spread the word about the show. So if you got a few seconds, please leave a comment with your review. And of course, join our Facebook group and follow me on Instagram at The Squad Room. Special thanks for our sponsors today. Gear Supply. If you're looking for best prices on industry-leading warranty coverage of your radio equipment, make sure you check them out and use the coupon code TheSquadroom to get 10% off your order. That's at comgearsupply.com. All right. Until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.